The night shift at the military hospital was anything but calm. The corridors echoed with muted footfalls and the steady hum of medical equipment. Olivia Carter adjusted her surgical mask with a practiced flick of her wrist, the thin fabric settling snugly over her nose. Her dark brown hair was pulled back tightly into a no-nonsense bun, strands tucked meticulously behind ears that had grown accustomed to the constant noise. Though she kept her eyes cast low, there was a fire burning quietly behind those sharp green irises, one that no one around her quite understood yet. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Dr. Gregory Stanton's voice cut across the crowded staff room like a cold wind. Stanton was the chief surgeon, a man well into his 50s, whose salt and pepper hair and immaculately pressed white coat lent him an almost regal air. His gaze fell on Olivia with unmistakable disdain. "First-year resident, right? You're barely past medical school." The word stung, though perfectly expected. Olivia remained unfazed. A calmness wrapped around her like armor. She took a slow breath and nodded, her voice steady. "Yes, sir. I'm ready." Staff nurses and residents exchanged glances. Whispers floated about like invisible smoke, questions hidden behind polite smiles. Maeve Kim, one of the day shift nurses, watched Olivia carefully, catching sight of something few noticed. A subtle tattoo of an eagle, its wings folded delicately around her wrist beneath the sleeve of her scrub. "They think she's just another temporary nurse," Maeve murmured to a colleague, eyes narrowing. "But that tattoo, that's not just decorative, military issue." The emergency room was several floors below, bustling with the low murmur of tension that never truly faded in a hospital that operated round the clock. Monitors beeped softly in rhythm with unseen heartbeats, while overhead lights flickered intermittently. Dr. Stanton's skepticism was known throughout the department. He often dismissed the newcomers as inexperienced or unprepared. Today was no different as he sized her up before turning away. "Let's see if you can keep up tonight. You're stepping into a war zone. Don't become a casualty." Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line, but did not rise to challenge his words. Instead, her fingers flexed in silent readiness. She moved with precise economy, every movement calculated and purposeful, a stark contrast to the chaos that swirled around her. "So, where are you watching from?" interrupted a sudden voice, breaking the fourth wall with ease. If you want to see how Olivia Carter flips the script tonight, make sure to subscribe to Emergency Heroes Stories, because what she does in the next few minutes will leave you speechless. The long shift was just beginning, but somewhere beneath the surface, tension was mounting like a brewing storm. Olivia's story was about to unfold. An invisible veteran rising from the shadows, underestimated and overlooked, prepared to take on impossible odds. The only question was how long the others would continue to doubt her. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to everything, mingling with the distant clamor of emergency alarms and hurried footsteps. Olivia moved through the ward like a ghost, unseen but undeniably present. A cluster of residents gathered near the nurses' station, voices low but filled with sharp curiosity. "Lucky guess if she pulls this off," one whispered. "Probably just binge-watched every surgery video online." "She's not qualified to perform anything complex yet," another scoffed. "Just a warm body filling a slot." The corner of Olivia's mouth twitched, but she said nothing. She picked up her clipboards, notes, and prepared herself for the simple case assigned. An appendectomy on a patient tagged as least critical. Perfect for testing. The ward buzzed with quiet murmurs as the patient was wheeled in. A young soldier who had reported abdominal pain earlier, but seemed stable. The pre-op nurse glanced uneasily at Olivia's surgical gloves, silently mourning the odds. Yet, as Olivia scanned test results in the patient's chart, a flicker of something caught her eye. An anomaly in the blood markers, subtle but present. She paused, fingertips brushing over the image projected on her tablet. "This isn't routine," she murmured. Signs of peritonitis developing, complication hidden beneath. Her attempts to alert the supervising surgeon were met with shrugs and dismissals. "Vitals are within acceptable ranges. Don't overthink it. Pre-op jitters, probably." Time ticked forward relentlessly. The night stretched. Shadows deepened in the sterile halls, and Olivia's quiet conviction only grew stronger. The clock above the entrance blinked 22:47 in cold, unyielding red. She steadied herself, took a deep breath, and prepared to prove everyone wrong. The first battle had just begun. The hospital's night air felt heavier as whispers spread through the corridors with growing momentum. In the nurses' break room, a small group of residents huddled together, voices hushed but sharp with skepticism. "I don't buy it," said one, brushing hair back nervously. "First-year resident. But she sutures like she's been at it for years." Another scoffed, shaking his head. "Lucky guess, I bet. Probably binge-watched every surgical video they could find on YouTube last night." A third chimed in quietly. "No one learns to do those military-style interrupted sutures from videos alone. It's hands-on experience, muscle memory. You can't fake that." The doubters had no idea Olivia was listening, tucked behind the glass partition, her jaw tight. She did not rise to defend herself. Instead, she preferred to let her work speak. That was the discipline she had learned long ago. Let actions eclipse judgments. Outside in the emergency bay, Dr. Gregory Stanton stood observing, his arms crossed, face set in a mixture of disdain and calculated distance. His eyes occasionally flicked toward Olivia, stationed quietly, but poised. Stanton caught the hovering whispers and smirked. "She's just a kid pretending to be a surgeon," he muttered, loud enough for a passing nurse to hear. Olivia's silence remained unbroken. Later, as the simple appendectomy case was prepared, Stanton approached the surgical area. Pausing just behind Olivia, he added with a sneer, "Did you get that tattoo at some strip mall parlor? That eagle? Looks more like cliché cosplay than real military service." Olivia's eyes rose briefly, steady and unwavering. "Sir, my training is thorough. I don't intend to disappoint." The jab was meant to rattle her, yet it only hardened her resolve. Her hands did not tremble as she meticulously reviewed the pre-op notes, surgical instruments laid out with calm precision. The patient, a young private suffering from abdominal pain consistent with appendicitis, was wheeled quietly into the prep room. Vital signs were stable, the initial assessment straightforward. Stanton gave his nod for Olivia to proceed. The case considered routine enough for a newcomer. But Olivia noticed something others overlooked. Slight changes in abdominal rigidity, uncharacteristic of uncomplicated appendicitis, subtle swelling near the lower quadrant, shadows in the imaging that hinted at deeper infection. Her voice, calm but insistent, reached the supervising nurse. "There's a developing peritonitis here. This isn't a straightforward appendectomy. I need to alert Dr. Stanton." The response was dismissive. "Vitals are within normal range. The patient's anxious. We managed that pre-op." Minutes stretched as Olivia prepared, but her mind raced. Every small inconsistency mattered in this environment where missteps cost lives. The clock above the doorway ticked to 23:12. Back in the staff room, conversation among residents sparked again. "I heard she's been reading battlefield surgical techniques," one offered skeptically. "Maybe that explains her confidence." "Confidence or arrogance?" another queried. "Let's see if she keeps her nerve once the real pressure hits." Meanwhile, Maeve Kim quietly brought Olivia's attention to an updated report from radiology. The hints at possible IED, improvised explosive device, fragmentation patterns, common in field combat injuries, made Olivia's heart skip. It was a detail imperceptible to most civilian-trained doctors, but burned sharp in her memory. She clenched her fist briefly under the sterile gloves. This case was far from routine, yet it was her chance to prove her worth. In a moment that passed unnoticed by many, a paramedic in military fatigues, Sargento Marcus Reed, watched the young surgeon move, his dark eyes sharp beneath a worn face marked with battle scars. Recognition flickered behind the stoic mask. "She's different," he whispered to himself. The emergency department hummed with quiet tension as Olivia moved forward, ready not just to perform surgery, but to redefine the expectations placed on her. The night was far from over, and the real challenges were only beginning. The operating room was a realm of stark white light and hushed urgency. Olivia stood at the sterile table, unflinching, as she prepared for the appendectomy. Her eyes flicked swiftly across the instruments laid out in precise order. Scalpel, small Richardson retractor, suction tube, all instruments that would soon be extensions of her will. Scalpel. she commanded quietly but firmly, her voice cutting clean through the ambient hum. With a practiced flick of her wrist, the blade sliced through the first layers of tissue. Olivia's hands moved with the deliberate precision of a seasoned surgeon, but there was an unmistakable fluidity, a rhythm akin to the military drills etched into her muscle memory from years spent under fire. Every incision was calculated, minimizing trauma without sacrificing speed. "Small Richardson," she called, carefully pinching away tissue as the assistant handed over the instrument without a word. The team moved in synchrony, but all eyes were subtly drawn to Olivia's hands, which seemed almost to dance over the patient's abdomen. From behind the glass walls of the observation room, Maeve gasped softly. "Look at that incision," she whispered. "This is not just skill. This is surgical artistry." One of the other residents mumbled, "How did she know to do the interrupted sutures that way?" "I've never seen that technique before." Olivia responded only with focus, her face the epitome of calm concentration. The patient's vitals held steady, heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, all meticulously monitored. Every so often, Olivia glanced at the screens but rarely lifted her gaze above the operating field. "Retractor," she requested next, pulling back layers to reveal the appendix lodged beneath swollen tissue. A faint discoloration marked the peritoneum, her earlier suspicion confirmed. "Prepare suction," she ordered sharply as fluids began to accumulate. Minutes drained away, but Olivia's hands remained unwavering. She performed a military-style interrupted suture on the appendix, a technique designed to withstand high-stress environments and prevent infection. It was a skill refined on battlefields, honed under pressure, where hesitation meant death. Someone whispered, "Jesus." The faces of nearby residents and nurses shifted. Wide eyes, furrowed brows, mouths slightly agape. "What should have been a 3-hour surgery was shaping up to finish in half the time," whispered a nurse, glancing at the clock mounted on the OR wall. 53 minutes. That was all Olivia needed. As the final knot was tied and the surgical field cleaned, the senior anesthesiologist checked the patient's vitals once more. "Patient ready for recovery. Prognosis is excellent." One of the surgeons who had initially voiced doubts about Olivia stared open-mouthed. "That was... How did you—" Olivia simply nodded toward the patient without a hint of pride. "Just doing my job." As the patient was carefully wheeled out, Olivia turned toward the next room where a new emergency awaited. No celebration, no excuses, only the relentless readiness of someone whose battlefield never truly ends. The night pressed on, but Olivia's first victory was quietly sealed, a testament to the unyielding strength beneath her quiet exterior. Chaos erupted through the hospital's wards as the emergency alert blared sharply across every speaker. "Trauma alert. Multiple casualties inbound." The voice crackled over the radio, urgency laced in every syllable. In seconds, the emergency bay transformed into a controlled frenzy. Sirens screamed outside. The pounding footsteps of medics echoed as wheelchairs and stretchers clattered down the halls. Nurses barked orders over one another. Coordinates and patient statuses shouted clearly to the attending trauma teams. Olivia's steady hands clenched briefly, adrenaline sparking behind her calm eyes. The bulletin had confirmed her worst fear. A convoy struck by an improvised explosive device had been rushed to their care. The Frontline was now inside the hospital walls. "Multi-vehicle collision reported," Stanton barked, striding through the chaos. "Expect extensive trauma. I want triage on high alert." The paramedic crew, already lined up with their stretchers, hurried in, each bearing stories of battlefield wounds and desperation. The center of the storm was stark. Patients with shattered bones, deep lacerations, traumatic amputations. Internally, hemorrhages screamed louder than any siren could. Olivia instantly launched her mental triage. Her gaze darted from one patient to the next, assessing injuries with surgical precision. Broken ribs, pneumothorax, the punctured lung threatening to collapse, internal bleeding heavy enough to flood entire cavities. One wounded soldier had a dangerously swollen abdomen, a possible cardiac tamponade. Stanton circled the room like a hawk, assigning the most critical cases to his senior surgeons. When it was Olivia's turn, he hesitated, voice edged with reluctant disdain. "You'll take the least critical one. Don't get in the way. Olivia met his gaze steadily. I can handle this patient. And so it began. The most brutal test of skill, knowledge, and nerve all at once. Amid the whirl of activity, a low voice broke through. Wait, is that? No, it can't be. Marcus Reed, the paramedic with years in active duty, scanned Olivia's deliberate movements and the strategic way she gave orders. He leaned toward a colleague, whispering, "That's the surgeon who trained me in Fallujah." His revelation went unnoticed by most. But for Olivia's sake, it was both shield and sword. For now, the secret was intact. A hidden badge of honor waiting to be revealed. The hospital clock ticked down, 12:15 a.m., each second packed with decisions to save lives or mourn lost chances. Ambulances kept arriving, each bearing fresh wounds and fresh stories. Olivia focused utterly, navigating the chaotic crescendo with a clarity born of hard-won experience. Multiple operating theaters burned with bright light and steady hands. Nurses and doctors worked in tandem to stabilize, repair, and resurrect where possible. Olivia did not flinch as the wounded soldier was wheeled toward her, body broken but spirit unyielding. Her hands flew over monitors and incisions. Simultaneous actions unfolded, a testament to her training, mental fortitude, and sheer determination. The night was far from over, but Olivia had firmly assumed her place in the eye of this chaotic storm. Dr. Gregory Stanton's office was a stark contrast to the hectic emergency room. Its walls lined with framed certificates and surgical accolades, yet the atmosphere was cold, heavy with quiet judgment. Stanton sat behind the imposing mahogany desk, steepling his fingers as he looked sharply at Olivia. "Dr. Carter," he began, voice lowered but firm. 6 weeks. And yet, you've consistently performed at a third-year resident level, far beyond what's expected. Olivia's posture was straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. "Thank you, Dr. Stanton," she replied cautiously, careful to control her tone. "Your surgical technique isn't what I've ever seen before," Stanton continued. "Those military-style sutures, precision. Where exactly did you learn all this?" Olivia hesitated, eyes flickering toward the door, then back. "I prepare extensively for every procedure. I study hard," she said, choosing her words carefully. "That's how I've managed to succeed despite my limited experience here." Stanton's sharp gaze didn't waver. "It's unusual. I want truth, not vague answers." Before Olivia could respond, the sudden blare of a trauma alert interrupted them, slicing through the tension like a scalpel. "All available surgical staff to Trauma Bay immediately." Stanton sighed heavily, rubbing his forehead. "Duty calls. This can wait." Olivia stood immediately, instincts kicking in as she headed toward the emergency area. "Before you go, Dr. Carter," Stanton added, "remember, the hospital depends on order and hierarchy." In the hallway, Olivia encountered Sargento Marcus Reed, the paramedic who had earlier recognized her. His voice was low, steady. "You know that patient in Bay 5? The one everyone's saying is a lost cause. Been down for 12 minutes, they say she's gone." Olivia's heart quickened. "It's not over till it's over." Marcus's look softened. "I know you from Afghanistan. Those hands saved my squad. But here? Nobody's supposed to know." His words struck a deep chord. The divided life she'd tried to keep separate was merging violently. Inside the trauma bay, monitors beeped an ominous rhythm over the unconscious figure on the table. The patient's injuries were severe. Shrapnel wounds near the heart, a clear fragmentation pattern indicating an IED blast. Olivia ran a hand over her forehead, feeling the weight of both worlds collide. Her carefully constructed civilian identity began to crack under the pressure. Taking a breath, voice steady but resolute, she declared, "I need 3 more minutes. Give me the chance to do what I was trained for." The gathered team exchanged uncertain glances, but none dared deny her. The first half of the night had been a proving ground. Now the real test was about to begin. The trauma bay had fallen into an eerie silence, broken only by the beeping monitors and the occasional hiss of ventilators. Eyes instinctively drew to Olivia Carter as she prepared to unveil the truth cloaked beneath layers of professional restraint. "I'm not just a resident," Olivia began, her tone steady, but commanding attention. "Afghanistan. Iraq. 6 years in field hospitals. Major Sarah Mitchell, MD, U.S. Army Medical Corps. 3 tours as a special operations medic. Murmurs rippled through the gathered staff, disbelief mingling with awe. The echo of her real identity hung heavy in the sterile air. Over 800 combat surgeries, 43 lives saved, 3 commendations for surgical excellence, she continued, letting the weight of each accolade settle on the room like a challenge. Dr. Stanton's jaw tightened visibly. His usually cold demeanor faltered, eyes fixed on Olivia's unyielding posture. "That explains," was all he managed before a despondent shake of the head. Silence followed. The emergency room seemed to hold its breath. Olivia stepped forward, hands steady as she donned surgical gloves, gloved fingers flexing with a surgeon's grace. "Let's start triage," she said, her voice rising above the tension. "Combat casualty protocols," she ordered, each syllable precise and deliberate. "Battlefield resurrection technique." Her hands moved like a pianist's over an invisible keyboard, each touch calculated, each movement deliberate as she navigated the maze of shattered tissue and bleeding vessels. The patient's vitals began to plummet, flatlining, heart rate faltering, monitors yelling alarms that seemed to pierce through the thick tension. "Flatline," the anesthesiologist warned, panic barely contained. Olivia's voice cut through instantly, calm under fire. "Initiate rapid fluid infusion. Prepare the defibrillator." A hush fell over the observers as the entire team responded like cogs in a well-oiled machine, spurred into action by her lead. Monitors screamed again, and then, slowly, Marcus Chen's eyes fluttered open. The team exhaled collectively, the impossible suddenly made real. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. "Remarkable. Surgical precision. Unparalleled," Stanton whispered, disbelief in his tone. "How is this possible?" Olivia didn't smile. Instead, she locked eyes with the watching medical team and posed silently. "When everyone tells you to give up, how do you decide when to keep fighting?" The room stayed quiet, each processing the gravity of the night's revelations. Character count, 7/920. The trauma bay had fallen into an eerie silence, broken only by the beeping monitors and the occasional hiss of ventilators. Eyes instinctively drew to Olivia Carter as she prepared to unveil the truth cloaked beneath layers of professional restraint. "I'm not just a resident," Olivia began, her tone steady but commanding attention. "Afghanistan, Iraq, 6 years in field hospitals. Major Sarah Mitchell, MD, U.S. Army Medical Corps. 3 tours as a special operations medic." Murmurs rippled through the gathered staff, disbelief mingling with awe. The echo of her real identity hung heavy in the sterile air. "Over 800 combat surgeries, 43 lives saved, 3 commendations for surgical excellence," she continued, letting the weight of each accolade settle on the room like a challenge. Dr. Stanton's jaw tightened visibly. His usually cold demeanor faltered, eyes fixed on Olivia's unyielding posture. "That explains," was all he managed, before a despondent shake of the head. Silence followed. The emergency room seemed to hold its breath. Olivia stepped forward, hands steady as she donned surgical gloves, gloved fingers flexing with a surgeon's grace. "Let's start triage," she said, her voice rising above the tension. "Combat casualty protocols," she ordered, each syllable precise and deliberate. "Battlefield resurrection technique." Her hands moved like a pianist's over an invisible keyboard, each touch calculated, each movement deliberate as she navigated the maze of shattered tissue and bleeding vessels. The patient's vitals began to plummet, flatlining, heart rate faltering, monitors yelling alarms that seemed to pierce through the thick tension. "Flatline," the anesthesiologist warned, panic barely contained. Olivia's voice cut through instantly, calm under fire. "Initiate rapid fluid infusion. Prepare the defibrillator." A hush fell over the observers as the entire team responded like cogs in a well-oiled machine, spurred into action by her lead. Monitors screamed again, and then, slowly, Marcus Chen's eyes fluttered open. The team exhaled collectively, the impossible suddenly made real. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. "Remarkable. Surgical precision. Unparalleled," Stanton whispered, disbelief in his tone. How is this possible? Olivia didn't smile. Instead, she locked eyes with the watching medical team and posed silently. When everyone tells you to give up, how do you decide when to keep fighting? The room stayed quiet, each processing the gravity of the night's revelations. The next morning broke quietly over the hospital grounds, sunlight filtering softly through the curtained windows of the staff lounge. Olivia stood at the center of a small gathering, her expression still calm, though weariness etched faint lines around her green eyes. Dr. Gregory Stanton approached, his usual arrogance replaced by something unfamiliar, humility. He paused before speaking, voice measured and stripped of its earlier condescension. Dr. Carter. Major Carter, he corrected himself. I owe you an apology. A profound one. Olivia's gaze remained steady, waiting. I made assumptions, he continued. Assumptions rooted in ignorance and prejudice. Your skill, your experience. I dismissed them without reason. I was completely wrong. Other colleagues who had earlier mocked her now stood awkwardly nearby, their faces painted with newfound respect and curiosity. One resident tentatively stepped forward. Would you be willing to teach us? Those techniques, we've never seen anything like them. Olivia nodded slowly, acknowledging the gesture, but without triumph. Training saves lives. I'll share what I know. Within hours, a formal proposal arrived on Olivia's desk. A permanent position as senior trauma surgeon, full surgical privileges, complete autonomy in her practice. The hospital administration had moved swiftly, recognizing the value she brought not just in skill, but in potential transformation. But Olivia hesitated. She sat alone in the empty locker room, eyes closed, memories flooding back unbidden. Kandahar. The mission compromised. Children caught in crossfire. Innocent lives slipping through her fingers despite every effort. The guilt had followed her across continents, settling into her bones like an old wound that refused to heal. I wanted to learn civilian medicine, she whispered to herself. I wanted to escape the weight of those decisions, life and death under fire, where hesitation costs everything. Her hands trembled slightly as she recalled the faces of those she couldn't save. The door opened. General Robert Wallace entered, his uniform decorated with medals that spoke of decades in service. His presence commanded immediate respect, yet his voice was gentle. Major Carter, may I? Olivia stood instinctively, nodding. I know what happened in Kandahar, Wallace began, his tone firm but compassionate. Those children died because you were betrayed by your own command. The intelligence was faulty, deliberately so. You were set up to fail. Olivia's breath caught. What? Documents declassified last year confirmed it, he explained. You carried guilt that was never yours to bear. Tears threatened, but she held them back. The weight she'd carried for years suddenly felt lighter, the chains of self-blame beginning to loosen. Wallace continued, I'm here to offer you something bigger. A national training program. Military and civilian integration. Your protocols could save thousands. Olivia looked up, voice steady once more. I accept. On 3 conditions. Full control of curriculum, no interference, and mandatory mental health support for all trainees. Wallace smiled. Agreed. 3 months later, the transformation was undeniable. 3 months had passed since that transformative night in the trauma bay. The hospital's emergency wing now bore the unmistakable mark of Olivia Carter's influence. A revitalized training center buzzing with energy and purpose. Statistics told the story better than words could. Trauma survival rates had climbed by 23%. 47 military personnel had walked out of the hospital alive because of protocols Olivia designed. Her methods were being studied nationwide, dissected and adapted by medical institutions eager to replicate her success. Residents from across the country flocked to the program, drawn by stories of the surgeon who had bridged the chasm between battlefield medicine and civilian care. The simulation lab became a cathedral of learning, where young doctors practiced under Olivia's watchful eye, absorbing techniques forged in the crucible of war. On a crisp autumn morning, Olivia stood at the podium in the main lecture hall, addressing a class of eager residents. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had earned every ounce of respect through sacrifice and skill. Medicine isn't just about protocols, she began, It's about adapting, improvising, never giving up even when the odds seem impossible. Among the students sat a young veteran, her eyes haunted by memories too fresh to be forgotten. After class, she approached hesitantly. "Dr. Carter, I served in Iraq. I'm afraid to tell anyone here. They won't understand." Olivia's expression softened immediately. She placed a gentle hand on the student's shoulder. "Your experience isn't a weakness. It's your greatest strength. Don't hide who you are. The world needs what you've learned." The young woman's eyes brimmed with gratitude. Later that week, a photograph arrived in Olivia's office. Marcus Chen, the patient she'd saved that critical night, smiling broadly with his twin daughters. The accompanying note read simply, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Olivia pinned the photo to her bulletin board, a reminder of why she did what she did. General Wallace visited again, this time with news of international interest. "The European Union wants to implement your protocols. FEMA is requesting your consultation for national disaster preparedness training." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "I accept. But only if we expand mental health support for every trainee. Trauma doesn't end when the surgery does." "Agreed," Wallace replied without hesitation. As evening descended, Olivia stood in the empty trauma bay, the place where her two worlds had finally merged. She thought back to Dr. Stanton's initial mockery, the dismissive glances, the ridicule. That eagle tattoo on her wrist had become a symbol not of shame, but of excellence earned through fire. Excellence comes from embracing who you are. She murmured to herself. Some burdens are too important to carry alone. The emergency doors burst open suddenly. Paramedics rushed in, wheeling a critical patient. Olivia's eyes sharpened instantly, adrenaline flooding her system. "What do we have?" she called out, already moving toward the stretcher. "Multiple traumas, internal bleeding, vitals unstable." Olivia's hands moved with practiced efficiency, assessing, commanding, leading. She was exactly where she was meant to be. But Olivia's journey is just the beginning. Across hospitals and battlefields, countless heroes are fighting their own battles, searching for recognition, struggling to reconcile who they were with who they've become. Their stories of courage and transformation are waiting to be told. If this journey moved you, join our Emergency Heroes Stories family. Share your thoughts below. Have you ever felt underestimated? Have you carried burdens no one else understood? We're honored you joined us tonight. If this story touched your heart, we have an entire collection of incredible tales waiting. Stories of unsung heroes, second chances, and courage that defies all odds. Why not explore another journey right now? And if you want to ensure you never miss our next inspiring story, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We'd be honored to welcome you into our community. Until we meet again in the next tale, thank you for being here with us tonight.